Hi, welcome to the show tonight, The History of the Irish on Staten Island. My name is Patricia Brady. I'll be hosting the show tonight. It is a live call-in show, and I have two wonderful guests that are volunteering their time dispelling a lot of the myths and the Irish people about their culture and Irish people on Staten Island. So I would like to introduce my two guests, and right over here at my left, close left, we have Patricia Salmon. She's the curator of history at the Staten Island Museum.
Staten Island Museum, yes, in St. George.
Welcome to the show, Pat.
Thank you.
And also we have, to my far left, we have Margaret Del Bagno.
That's correct.
And she's the part of the Ladies' Ancient Order of the Hibernians. She's the president, Division 4, St.
Bridget.
St. Bridget.
Yes.
Okay, so I welcome you, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Irish. And Pat, I'd like to ask you a question. You're the curator of history at the museum. Tell us a little bit about the museum itself and maybe how you got interested in the Irish over here on Staten Island.
Sure. Well, a little bit about the museum first. The museum has been around since 1881. We've had our 125th anniversary last year. We're very proud of that fact. In addition to being the curator of history, I run the archives and library. So we have all kinds of information about everything you can imagine about Staten Island and its history. Well, the reason, of course, that I'm interested in the Irish on Staten Island is because I'm Irish and I'm on Staten Island, first of all. I've been here since I'm one year old. And I went back to college, the College of Staten Island, around 1994. And I was in the history of Staten Island class with Professor Wiener. And I was doing a paper, and I decided to do a paper about the Irish on Staten Island. So what did I do? I knew about the archives of the Staten Island Institute of Arts and Sciences, also known as the Staten Island Museum. So I made an appointment with the History Archives and Library to learn about the Irish people so I could write my paper and present it in class. Went to the archives and found out there wasn't much information about the Irish on Staten Island. So the paper evolved into the Irish on Staten Island, ignored as a group in the annals of Staten Island history. So in order to gather up information about the Irish, I started going through the histories that had been written, specifically the 5-volume series by William T. Davis and Charles W. Lang, featuring a lot of biographical information about people. So I looked at all of the Irish surnames, and that's how the paper started. And of course, I presented the paper to my professor in the class and what have you. But now that I'm the curator, it's evolved into a public presentation that I do, and I've supplemented it with information from the archives, from the Staten Island Advance, from talking to the Hibernians and various sources on Staten Island.
That's good. That's wonderful to have an interest of Irish people. Staten Island is such a diverse island, and we've got the Italian, German, Dutch, English. Well, okay, Irish this time. St. Patrick's Day is around the corner. I'd like to talk to Margaret for a minute. And Margaret, you're the president of Division 4, Ladies' Ancient Order of Hibernians. How did you get started with this? And what is Hibernian? What does that mean?
Well, it certainly is an ancient Irish word, and one of the original words that calling island, Hibernia. And the ladies were started in 1838, and the whole purpose of that was to protect the young girls and the women coming over from Ireland to make sure they were safe, they were sheltered. And then it slowly evolved over time into where we have taken other missions on. I became interested because my family's from Ireland. My parents are from County Cork, and my two brothers and sisters were born there. When they came over, my father and my mother were members of the Hibernians also here on the North Shore. And it was a natural evolution, I think, for me to go to the Hibernians and to be part of it for culturally, to carry on the tradition and to make sure the Irish culture, the Irish traditions are not lost, because that's such an important thing, not to lose who you are as a people. So that's my, what happened to me in the course of time.
Full blown Irish there?
Absolutely, yeah.
A few Irish people tonight. Okay. Pat, you've brought some pictures to the show tonight, and Pat is going to talk about a little bit about the history of the Irish. And we have a few pictures, and David, if you can put up the first picture, Pat will explain.
Well, this particular picture comes into play in the mid-1880s, towards the late 1850s. But prior to that, in 1799, we had a quarantine station that operated on Staten Island. And what was the quarantine station? It was a place where people who were sick and ill were sequestered when they came over on ships from the old world, from Europe, pretty much. Well, in the 1830s, the 1840s, what happened in Ireland? Well, we know full well what happens in Ireland. We had major potato famines, especially around the late 1840s. And for that reason, thousands and thousands and thousands of immigrants came to the New World, and they were made to stop in the harbor of New York because many of the people on the ships were sick. They were ill. They had cholera, they had typhoid, they had tuberculosis. Many of these diseases were contagious. So the ship's doctors would board the ships, and they would select those people who were sick, and they'd send them over to the quarantine station on Staten Island, operated in Tompkinsville, right southwest, let's say, of the current Staten Island ferry terminal. So it was at that site that thousands and thousands of Irish immigrants were sequestered, along with other groups, but the Irish were the largest group of people that were there, especially at that time.
And what years were we talking about?
Right now, we're talking about the 1830s and the 1840s when the famines were going on. So
they had some diseases, and they were sick when they came over.
Right.
Did many people make it through these quarantine areas? Or, how was the fatality?
Right. There are not a lot of records found from the quarantine station and the years it was in operation, but it's come into play of late. I'm sure many of the people in the audience they read the Staten Island Advance. They see that the municipal parking lot in St. George has been, quote unquote, turning up some bodies of late. They wanted to build a courthouse there, and there was an archaeological dig done. Well, these were actually the remains of many of the immigrants who died at the quarantine station. There were at least 2 burial grounds located where that municipal lot is. So they're still coming to light that the presence of these Irish immigrants. And also there were German immigrants there as well, and others from other ethnic groups. But they were the 2 major groups at that time.
Okay. If we could put the next picture up. And who's this? Young man?
Well, actually, in our current community, there's a very well-known man by the name of Dean Curry, and this is Dean's great-grandfather. This is Michael Curry. He came over from Tipperary about 1840, and he bought the famous Washington Hotel that operated in what was then known as Richmond and what we now call Richmond Town. It was right next to St. Andrew's Church, between the church and between the creek that runs down there, the Richmond Creek. So he was well known in hotel circles and providing hospitality and things of that nature. His son, Patrick Curry, was also a hotel owner. He owned the Black Horse Hotel, also known as the Black Horse Tavern, which operated near what is now the Rustic Music Center over in by the corner of, say, Amboy Road and Richmond Road, where it comes into play over there. So they were very prominent Irish Americans who were on Staten Island. We've had many, many prominent Irish Americans. We've had John Crawford Jr., who was the founder of the Staten Island Advance. He was originally started what we now call the Staten Island Advance in about 1886. It was known as the Richmond County Advance. And he was from County Cabin, and he's right now still buried at Fairview Cemetery over in Myers Corners.
Okay. All right, David, if you could put the next picture up.
Okay, that's Dr. Patricia O'Connor Halloran. And she's famous for a number of reasons. First of all, she married the son of Dr. John L. Halloran, who was a veterinarian on Staten Island. He opened a veterinarian hospital over in Stapleton. And being the true Irishman that he was, he mainly worked with horses, because as we all know, the Irish had a love of horses. Eventually, he evolved his practice to include other farm animals, but also household pets, cats, dogs, things of that nature. As I said, his son married Dr. Patricia O'Connor Halloran. And what happened was, about World War II, the veterinarian who was working at the Staten Island Zoo needed to go off to war, so they needed somebody to take his spot. And she was selected because many of the men had gone off to war, and so she started to work there during World War II, and she stayed there until her retirement in the late 1990s. And she wrote the definitive work on taking care of birds and how to treat them for different diseases, and that volume is still in effect today and still used. It was well over 400 pages. And she was a fabulous woman. She was one of the founders, amongst many, of the Mud Lane Society for the Renaissance of Stapleton.
Okay, come on back to us, David. Is there still a practice where she was practicing? What area was she practicing in?
This was, right now, the hospital still exists. It's on Bay Street over by what's now known as Aesop's Table, across the street from there. The animal hospital has evolved. The family is no longer in that business, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, we have another picture.
This is a good one. This is Jeremiah O'Donovan Rossa. He was what we refer to as a Fenian rebel. He was imprisoned about 1865 in Ireland. He was fighting for the freedom of Ireland. And he was imprisoned for what was supposed to be 20 years. Now, shortly after he was imprisoned, his third wife, Mary Jane Irwin, she did what most women did not do after their husbands were imprisoned. She decided to come to America, and she learned how to speak to the general public. She went for elocution classes and public speaking classes and things of that nature. This is the 1860s we're talking about. So why did she do this? Well, she did this so that she could go on speaking engagements and speaking tours, so that she could talk about the plight of Ireland, the plight of her husband, and the plight of the men that he was imprisoned with. And it served her very well, because when she returned to Ireland, the English who were running Ireland at that time said that Mr. O'Donovan Rossa could be free, but only if he would leave Ireland. And he was. He was banished from Ireland, in other words, for the next 20 years. So where did he go? He came to Staten Island. And he settled in the Mariners Harbor section of Staten Island. He had 13 children, and one of them is actually buried over in St. Peter's Cemetery. He's buried, I always mess up the pronunciation of this, Glasnevin.
Glasnevin, yeah.
Thank you.
Glasnevin.
Glasnevin, Ireland. Amongst his children, a woman who was very well known was Eileen McGowan, and she was the superintendent of the Department of Public Welfare in Borough Hall on Staten Island from 1915 to 1930, which was a very unusual job for a woman in the 1920s, 1930s to be running a whole department of people. She was involved with a number of other organizations, including the Staten Island Institute of Arts and Sciences, the place where I now work.
Okay, we're coming back. David, if you have another picture, we can actually go to another picture, and then we'll be putting the phone number up in a few minutes. Mm-hmm. All right. And who do we have here?
This is Matty McIntyre. He actually lived in Connecticut, but he moved to Staten Island. He too lived in the Mariners Harbor section of Staten Island. He was a fabulous baseball player. His first position about 1900, he was playing for the Philadelphia Athletics. Then about 1904 to 1911, he played for the Detroit Tigers, and then after that, he was with the Chicago White Sox. This was about 1912. He ended his career by playing with the professional baseball team out in San Francisco, California.
Okay. Come on back to us, David. What team did he play on? Was there a record of the team?
On Staten Island, he played for the Castletons. They were not a professional baseball team. But after he played with them, he went on to those other teams that I just mentioned.
Okay. All right, we'll put another picture up. In about 2-3 minutes, we'll put the phone number up, and maybe we'll get some phone calls.
Okay.
All righty.
Everybody knows who this is. This is Assemblywoman Elizabeth Connolly. She was the longest-serving woman in the New York State Assembly. She was the first woman appointed to be the pro tempore speaker in the New York State Assembly. She was active on Staten Island for many, many years, Irish-American woman, very well known. Instrumental in helping the special education people and in working with the Hibernians in the parade, and she also was involved in saving the Staten Island Greenbelt, something that those of us who are environmentalists are well aware of. She lived in Bull's Head when she started her political career, and later she moved to West Brighton, which is of course a well-known location for many Irish Americans on Staten Island.
She was also the first woman Grand Marshal for the Staten Island St. Patrick's Day Parade, and the only one so far.
Yeah. She was great.
Woman.
Yeah, she was a great woman,
Great
Mrs.
woman.
Connolly. Everybody has a lot of respect for her. She was also a board member for Friends of Abandoned Cemeteries of Staten Island. She was involved with that group up until her death, not so long ago.
Okay. All right. I have a question for Margaret. Have you lived on Staten Island all your life?
Yes, I'm a native. I was born here in Staten Island. I was born in New Brighton.
And have you seen a lot of changes?
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt, yes. Staten Island has certainly evolved from a small rural community to a very, bustling island now, very busy.
When you had come over early in your lifetime, were there a lot of Irish people in the area?
Oh, in Staten Island, yeah, particularly on the North Shore. And other parts, certainly, of the island. But my area was New Brighton, West New Brighton, and all through that area there was a large population, a large Irish community on Staten Island. And in fact, the first, in referring to the Irish Cultural Center, the first Hibernian hall they ever had was down on Jersey Street, and that was a large meeting place for all the Irish on Staten Island. And that was eventually sold, And right now we're working towards an Irish Cultural Center. We have a small base, but we're projecting ourselves into Snug Harbor, where we'll have a larger facility and take great advantage of the space to show all the wonderful things that we have culturally, for the people on Staten Island.
What are some of the events that the ladies Hibernians would be
we'd be involved, and we do a lot of fundraising. We do a lot of fundraising, and so we try to look for particular charitable organizations or people in need, and we will do a fundraiser, and that money will go totally to that person. We've done several on Staten Island for Good Counsel Home, for other organizations also, and people. The Wounded Warriors have been really a very big project that the ladies have been working on, to donate a lot of goods to them. So it depends on the need that we see and what we find, and that we do the work for. I also belong to an organization that we bring children over from Northern Ireland. It's the Irish Political Prisoners Children Holiday Program. It's a long title, but it's been in existence for 22 years. And we would bring children over from Northern Ireland. Different chapters also, by the way, throughout the country, and Staten Island was just the one chapter. There was a gentleman on Staten Island, his name was Richie Catile, and he was the one that started the chapter here on Staten Island. And this year is our last year because of the peace accord in Ireland. And our criteria for our organization was that the parents of the children had to be imprisoned. And so at this time, everyone is out of prison, so that need is no longer there. So we're going to dissolve that program now, which is great, which is what you want to happen.
Sounds good.
Yes.
Going to break in for a second. We have a phone caller.
Okay.
So let's see if we can take the phone caller. Caller, you're live.
Hello.
Can't hear the caller. Technical difficult.
Yes. Earlier you said that
We lost the caller.
Irish immigrants who came over in the 1840s, such as my ancestors, and for whatever reason they were put into quarantine, and most likely one of them died while in quarantine. Am I understand that he was buried in the quarantine which stood at the municipal parking lot? And what's going to happen with these bodies that were found there? Is there any group that I can contact about this, or is there more information to find out what they're going to do? Hopefully to give these bones or remains a final resting place in a Staten Island cemetery?
Okay.
Well, there's, it's up in the air somewhat what is to become of the remains of these people who are buried there. The Friends of Abandoned Cemeteries of Staten Island is working diligently to see if the remains that were found can be relocated to Staten Island Cemetery, which is a cemetery located on Richmond Terrace in West New Brighton. It was an abandoned cemetery at one time, but they have since reclaimed it and have fixed it up and beautified it again, and they feel that it would be a respectful way to it would be respectful to reinter the remains of these people into this ground, which is sacred and which is taken care of at this moment in time. As to the other parts of the comment and the question, it's not known exactly who is buried in these cemeteries that were located at the quarantine station in what is now St. George. At that time, the quarantine station was considered to be in Tompkinsville, border Tompkinsville, New Brighton. We now call it St. George, as I just said. Many of the immigrants who ended up in the St. George quarantine station were actually burned. Their remains were acidified using lye and various acids, and they were thrown by a wall that ran along St. Mark's Place. Many of them were also buried in the cemeteries. But as anybody would know who's of Irish Catholic descent, you would really prefer to be buried in consecrated ground, in a sacred spot, in a Catholic church, a cemetery, or a cemetery that was run by the Catholic Church at that time. So what happens over the years, in those early years, is hard to determine, because the state of New York did run the quarantine station, but many of the records are missing, although having said that, we do have a fine collection of records at the Institute, at the Staten Island Museum. But they don't specifically focus in on who was buried there, what were their names, what were their last names, were they Irish immigrants, were they German immigrants, who exactly were these people? It's very hard to determine. Although there was a woman by the name of Jennifer Hyatt who did an admirable job of collecting names of some of the people who died. She was working with the Friends of Abandoned Cemeteries. But overall, it's quite a question mark around the poor people that are buried there. The quarantine station also operated a number of cemeteries. It's a sort of a long, drawn-out story. That first graphic that we showed was a drawing from Harper's Weekly that depicted the first attempt to destroy the quarantine. The people in that area were horrified and terrified because the diseases that were affecting these people brought in on the immigrant ships were jumping over the walls and affecting the neighborhoods. So, yeah, there's that first graphic. So that's an early, circa 1857 depiction of a mob trying to bang the wall down, literally knock down the doors and get in there and get rid of this, what was considered to be a horrifying neighbor because of the diseases that were spreading. And they finally did destroy the place on September 1st, 1858. They went in, broke the walls down, set the whole place on fire, destroyed everything. Or they thought they'd destroyed everything, but they came back the following night and set another fire because they felt there was still a little bit standing. So we also see during that time period another cemetery being developed up in the Silver Lake area. As a matter of fact, it was believed to be at the 18th hole of the Silver Lake Golf Course, believe it or not. There are said to be hundreds and hundreds of immigrants buried there, and many of which are considered to be Irish immigrants. And it's interesting, there was a gal by the name of Caitlin Torney. I believe she lived up on Grimes Hill. Her family was up there last I heard as well. But as a student at one of the local Catholic schools, she got very interested in who exactly was buried at this 18th hole and why were they buried there. And she got so interested that she raised a lot of money. And there's a plaque. A plaque was placed on a boulder near the 18th hole to commemorate the memories of these poor immigrants and these poor folks that were buried there. There was also another cemetery established by the quarantine station. at what is called Princess Bay. They attempted to build a quarantine station there, and the people of Princess Bay, the good people of Princess Bay, would have no part of it whatsoever, so they burnt that place down too. But they did leave the cemetery behind. And according to Mr. William T. Davis, one of Staten Island's most well-known historians and one of the leading naturalists to ever live in this island, he said that that burial ground was used until the 1890s, even though it was supposed to have been closed down because a crematorium was set up on Swinburne Island to take care of the immigrant remains. Yes. So anyway, we can go on and on with that and have a separate discussion on cemeteries one of these days. But suffice to say that the burials were always a problem for the quarantine station, and there's a lot of question marks surrounding exactly who was buried where, who was burnt, whose body was destroyed. It's really quite an area of study for somebody who's really good at locating records.
Okay, we thank you for your call. And Margaret, I have a question. Did you go to school on Staten Island?
Yes, I went to school in Staten Island.
Which school did you attend?
I went to St. Peter's Grammar School and High School,
and
St. John's University also.
Now, were you at the school when the pool was
No.
functioning at the school?
No.
All right, so you went to the grammar school and St. Peter's?
High school, yeah. Actually, I started in St. Paul's first grade, second grade, then I went over we moved and I went to St. Peter's after that, yeah.
Did you find that there were a lot of Irish people?
Oh, yeah, so basically the whole school was Irish. St. Peter's was a large Irish parish, as was St. Paul's. And even down into Lady of Good Counsel, Blessed Sacrament, Sacred Heart, all those parishes were predominantly Irish, up to St. Teresa's too, yeah. Very large Irish population on Staten Island.
Okay.
Of course, the population wasn't that large, so predominantly there was a large Irish population on Staten Island.
And we also have to note that St. Peter's is a small school, and there weren't that many graduates. How many people do you remember?
There were 92 in my class, yeah.
So. And
St. Peter's is such a gorgeous church. It's just worthwhile, everyone, making the time to view it. The Mother Church on Staten Island for Catholics. It's a very beautiful church.
And we'll note that Monsignor Dorney is the
pastor there.
Yes, the pastor, and he's such a fine man.
Yes, he's a wonderful person.
Irish man. So, okay, we can go back to some of the pictures. We still have the phones up, the phone line, and if you have any questions, we can always break in. But Pat, what is this picture?
Well, this is an image from the Staten Island Advance, and the gentleman forward on the right-hand side with the green jacket who's raising his arms, that's one of our favorite people. That's Bill Riley. He is the state director for the Ancient Order of Hibernians, and he's there in a classroom at St. Adalbert School discussing the Irish history of Staten Island and discussing scholarship and what the Hibernians do and how the kids could get involved with the program. I'm sure Margaret would know more.
In particular, he was appealing to the students in reference to the Irish scholarship that they have, and it's a 4-year scholarship to any student on Staten Island that's graduating from the 8th grade to write on the particular topic that they choose from the Cultural Center, actually. And the scholarship is $500 a year, $2,000 scholarship, and it's that person's to do whatever they need with. But the topic is critical, and they have to do their own research, and they have to really show that it is their research that they have done with this, covering whatever the topic is. It's a good opportunity for the youngsters to get in touch, with their traditions and with their culture.
Is this just for Irish or for all cultures?
Basically, it's actually open to a lot of children on Staten Island, yes. Not particularly, it's presented to the schools as open to everyone, yes.
And does Mr. Riley go to different schools also?
He has gone around to various schools on Staten Island, yes.
And this is an open thing. It's ongoing thing.
Yes. Every year we have the scholarship competition.
And what ages again would that be?
8th grade.
8th grade.
8th grade. Public school, private school, parochial school. you have the opportunity to take advantage of the scholarship.
And get in touch with your own culture.
That's right.
Do
That's
a little
right.
bit of research.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, the phone numbers are up, so if someone has a question, call up, but in the meantime, we'll keep going with the pictures.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Well, no, John F. Kennedy Jr. did not live on Staten Island, but since we all have such a close connection, when I say us all, we all do, I'm referring to Irish Americans, particularly, especially those of us who were raised as Catholics, have a close connection to the Kennedy family. And this, of course, is John F. Kennedy Jr., a photo that was taken in the mid to late 1990s when he visited the Hungerford School over on Tompkins Avenue in the Clifton section of Staten Island. The Kennedys are, of course, very involved with special education and special education needs. And so John went there one day to visit with the school, and I was doing a program about Stapleton, and the school's right on the border of Stapleton and Clifton, so I included these images in an exhibition I did in 2001, and I certainly was glad to do that. Most Irish Americans, like I said, we have this strong connection to the Kennedys. When I was growing up in my Irish household, my father actually had records of John F. Kennedy's speeches, you know, that he would listen to every once in a while. Times when I've gone to Ireland, especially my first trip when I was 12 years old, you go into many of the houses and you would see photographs of President Kennedy.
With the Pope.
Yeah, with the Pope. I mean, the Kennedys are sort of our royalty, so to speak, and you know, the closest thing you get to royalty for Irish Catholics.
What did he talk about when he visited here?
I really don't recall, or I don't know, I'm not quite sure, but it was some kind of a special event at the Hungerford School, and he was there and working with the principals and vice principals, and you know, they had a nice bulletin board full of pictures in the school the day that I went there, all the way up to 2001, in commemoration of his visit there and in memory of him, because of course it was 2 years after he was killed in that tragic flight that went down.
Okay, we have had a few Irish people, visitors, coming over. Do you recall any, Margaret, besides the Kennedys?
Oh, sure. The Bertie Ahern has been here. The members of Sinn Féin have come over from Northern Ireland. Jerry Adams. He's come into New York City many times for the purpose of fundraising, but in particular to speak about the peace accord and the peace agreement in Northern Ireland, and to encourage Irish people, to encourage them to really talk it up and to help ask our politicians to become more involved in order to push the peace accord, you know, to get everyone to come to the table at Stromont, to get the government back on track. Yes.
Okay, we're going to break in for a second. We have another caller. So we'll take the caller. Caller, you live? Okay, we can't hear the caller yet.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, Pat.
Hello?
How you doing?
Good?
I wonder, John McCormick was a cousin of my grandmother's, and I wonder if there's any record of him ever appearing on Staten Island.
I have not come across any records of him appearing on Staten Island. I've come across his records appearing on Staten Island, but not any record of him. I don't know about Margaret.
I don't recall my parents, you know, ever talking about him being here. I know they had gone into Manhattan, you know, on several occasions to hear him and to see him, but I don't recall them ever speaking of him being on Staten Island. I don't have any memory of that at all.
Famous people on Staten Island, that's an interesting topic. Martin Sheen actually lived on Staten Island during his early years in
that's right.
in an apartment building over in the St. George section of Staten Island, and his son, Emilio Estevez, was actually born, from what I understand, on the living room floor in this apartment. So there's one famous Irishman who came to Staten Island, and of course the McCourt brothers. They were very
yeah.
well known. Frank McCourt, who wrote Angela's Ashes and Tis, he actually taught at McKee High School in the 1960s and the 1970s. He commuted over from Brooklyn, and he said that working at McKee High School made a man out of him, that were working with those students. And Malachi McCourt was on the radio in the 1960s and 1970s, but he also had a daughter who was living at the former Willowbrook State School, so he became involved with the tragic conditions that were going on over there, and he made an effort to make changes over there along with a number of other individuals. And as we all know, they were successful, and he was very successful, and he really worked hard to focus on the needs of special education people and what was going on at Willowbrook.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chris, we have another caller. Okay, caller, you live?
Hi, yeah. I would like to know where the term Black Irish came from.
Okay.
Well, as far as I know, it has to do with...
I understood that it came from the Armada when the Spanish, when the fleet was destroyed off the coast of Cork, and that the survivors came inland and stayed, and they were very dark and swarthy, and that's where I understood the term came from, Black Irish.
Right. And I actually know a man by the name of Robert Gomez, who I met years ago when I was in high school, and that's an Irish name, and that's from exactly what Margaret is talking about. And members of my family, specifically my niece, Kathleen Salmon, my brother's oldest daughter, she's almost black-haired and has the widow's peak, but the very, very fair skin. And that's what, when they say the Black Irish, that's my understanding of what is meant.
Yeah.
Okay. And Pat, did you attend school on Staten Island?
I did. I went to PS 22, I went to IS 51, and then I went to Moore Catholic High School. When, of course, there were, I would say the majority of the students that I went to school with were Irish, of course, followed by Italian, and then maybe Polish after that. But many, many Irish people there. Of course, the clergy, the people who taught there, there were a few priests at that time, and there were many nuns. Most of them were Irish. Yeah.
Okay, we do have one more picture. David, if you can put that up.
There we go.
And maybe you could tell us a little bit about this picture.
Well, perhaps my Irish heritage has influenced this. I wrote this book, Realms of History, The Cemeteries of Staten Island. It's published by the Staten Island Museum. It came out last year. It's all about the history of the cemeteries of Staten Island. I grew up next to the Merrill Homestead Graveyard, so it greatly influenced my outlook on history and my outlook on nature. But the historical aspects of cemeteries are mainly what are covered in this book, and it was a great pleasure for me to do some heavy-duty research into the cemeteries and come up with all kinds of facts and information about the cemeteries. Again, it's not about death, it's not about morbidity, it's about history of Staten Island and what we can learn in cemeteries. And it is for sale at the Staten Island Museum on Stuyvesant Place.
Okay, I'm going to break in for a second. We have another caller, and then we can continue about the cemeteries. Okay, caller, you're live.
Good evening.
Hello?
How are you tonight?
Good.
I have a question about the harp as a symbol of Ireland. Do you have anything to enlighten me about the relevance of the harp? How it's on the Irish penny, I believe. Where is that from? Or is it simply an instrument that's popular in Ireland?
I'm not really too sure about that, but I know as a musical instrument, they play it so in Ireland. But I think it's just a gorgeous piece, and that they use it all the time as a representation of Irish music. You'll see that all the time, many places in Ireland.
How about some of the other symbols, such as the shamrock? Are these also authentic to Ireland?
Well, the story of the shamrock is that St. Patrick was teaching, and he was teaching a particular truth in the Catholic Church, and he used the shamrock as an illustration of teaching about the Blessed Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he used the shamrock as a way of getting that thought across and helping the people understand the meaning of the Blessed Trinity.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Go.
Okay, thank you. Pat, now just let's go back to your book for a minute. Cemeteries, did you cover all the cemeteries on Staten Island?
I did. I covered as many as I could find, and believe it or not, I found over 75 of them, and I believe there are still more out there. There are all kinds of cemeteries. There's family cemeteries, we call them
Amazing.
homestead graveyards, various religious cemeteries. We have Jewish cemeteries, we have Catholic cemeteries on Staten Island. We have an African-American cemeteries. We even have a slave cemetery on Staten Island, believe it or not. Is located at the corner of what is Livermore Avenue and Forest Avenue over in Port Richmond Center there. So I've covered most of the burial grounds that I could locate on Staten Island, and it's very fascinating stuff. You know, you can learn about genealogy, you can learn about community history, religious history, medical history, so much to be learned from cemeteries. All you need to do is, put your old shoes on and go out into them, and you could learn everything you wanted to learn about Staten Island.
In these cemeteries, the older ones, the ones near Arthur Kill Road, are they, can you read the stones? Are they Irish descent over in that area also?
Well, the Irish, of course, are mainly in the Catholic cemeteries on Staten Island. Modern day Cemetery of the Resurrection. You'll find a lot of Irish people over in St. Peter's, though. I recount in the book how I was going to drop my car off for service on Parkinson Avenue, and I was coming up to the bus stop from the service center down there, and I was passing St. Mary's Cemetery, and all I kept seeing were all these last names with vowels on the ends of them, and I was laughing to myself, and I said, finally I saw a Riley. I found a Riley in there with the Giordanos and the Fiorellis and everything, so it was kind of interesting.
So today it's a mix. It's a mixture.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, the predominant ethnic group on Staten Island is now Italian. So, like, when you go to the Cemetery of the Resurrection, I mean, you're mainly seeing Italian surnames over there. A lot of Irish, though.
Okay. Do you know of any cemeteries in, like, maybe a family cemetery that you know of that you could talk about?
Well, for my family, I guess the few that are there, we use St. Peter's Cemetery.
St. Peter's.
So that really is the only cemetery, yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the programs that are coming up in the future with the Staten Island Museum, and maybe, are you with the Moravian Cemetery also? Are you connected with that?
We work with Rich Simpson, who's the historian over at Moravian Cemetery, on some of the programs that he's doing. I know he's having a big event on Memorial Day weekend, and he's such a great historian. We learn so much. If you go on the tours, you'll learn about the residents of Moravian Cemetery. That, in the past, he's spoken about Alice Austin, George William Curtis, the Shaw family. It's just a fascinating program that he has going on there, and it's he co-does that particular weekend with the Staten Island Museum. Okay. But as for me and the museum and history, well, we have a couple of things coming up. This program, the history of the Irish on Staten Island, there's a lot more components to it, where I talk a lot more about the biographical information of various Staten Islanders of Irish descent, and I will be doing a presentation at the museum in celebration of St. Patrick's Day and Staten Island on Wednesday, March 14th. It's at 12 noon. It's a lunch and learn program. So people come, and they're going to be treated to a traditional St. Patrick's Day meal. We're going to have corned beef, tates, boiled tates, as a matter of fact, cabbage, of course, carrots, and peasant bread and cheesecake. But we're also going to have brownies. We're going to have brownies under the influence and brownies on the wagon. So all folks need to do is to call Maria Fiorelli, or she's calling herself Maria O. Fiorelli this month.
She's Irish this month.
That's right. And register. It's $24 for non-members and $20 for members of the museum. And then I'm going to do the full in-depth presentation that I do on Staten Island Irish Americans. So we'd certainly like to invite people to participate in that, sign up for that, attend that. I'm also doing a walking tour this Sunday of St. George. We're going to meet at the Staten Island Museum at 12 noon. And that's a collaboration between the museum and the Historic Districts Council, a fundraiser for them.
And when is that date?
This Sunday, March 11th, 12 noon. You can reach us, by the way, get your pen and pencil, 718-727-1135. I'm at extension 123. That's easy to remember. And I do a whole presentation, various presentations for the general public. Cemeteries of Staten Island, railroad history of Staten Island, Irish on Staten Island. I do a presentation on Clay Pit Pond State Park Reserve, where I spent 8 years as a naturalist over there. I also do talks on Kreiserville, which we now call Charleston, St. George, Princess Bay, Stapleton, all kinds of fun stuff. So people just give us a call, and I'd love to come out and talk to anybody who wants to listen to me.
Now this week, it's a walking tour of St. George?
Yes.
St. George. So if someone were interested in going to this tour, where would you be starting, and what's the tour route?
Oh, okay. We're going to be starting at the museum itself. As I said, the museum was originally founded in 1881, so we'll talk about the history of the Institute, also known as the Staten Island Museum, because it's the oldest cultural organization that's operated continuously on Staten Island. Our collections are amazing, especially our natural history collections, which the Institute was founded by 14 naturalists, so we have all kinds of cicadas and beetles and butterflies and geology specimens and shells and things of that nature. And they also were very interested in the history of Staten Island, so we have this amazing history collection as well. So when people come to the museum, we'll start our tour in the museum building, and they'll learn about our natural history exhibition that just opened. They'll learn about the Staten Island Ferry through that permanent exhibition, and they'll learn about other aspects of the Institute's past. We're also going to visit the exterior. We're not going to be going inside, as far as I know, the St. George Theater, beautifully restored building over on Hyatt Street. We'll talk about the old Staten Island Academy that was on Stuyvesant Place across from the museum. We're going to talk about the history of the Staten Island Ferry. Everybody loves the history of the Staten Island Ferry, the terminals. How did the Staten Island Ferry in St. George get going? Who started it there? Why did they start it there? We'll talk about the different boats, the Kennedy-class boats, the Gold Star Mother boats. You know, we're going to talk about Staten Island Yankee Stadium. We're going to talk about a professional baseball team that was actually in that same area in 1886 and 1887. The first New York Metropolitans were playing on Staten Island in those 2 years, believe it or not. So we're going to talk about those kinds of things and all kinds of fun history things, some natural history, you know, what's in the New York Harbor, you know, Statue of Liberty, Governor's Island, Ellis Island.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds like it's encompassing a full tour there.
It's going to be good, I'm telling you.
What's the phone number again?
It's 718-727-1135, extension 123.
Okay, that's this Sunday. But all of a sudden, Sunday's going to pass. It goes by fast. The days fly by. Before I ask you what future events are coming up, I'd like to ask Margaret, are you participating with the ladies, the Hibernians, like for St. Patrick's Day?
Oh, yes, we're marching in St. Patrick's Day. We start the day with Mass at Alba House. Then we take the bus into Manhattan, and we line up at 46th Street between 5th Avenue and Madison, and we march up to 86th, 87th Street, and that's where we disperse. Great parade. It's wonderful walking up 5th Avenue. You know, hopefully it'll be a nice day.
Well, it's nice sometimes. I've been up there and it snowed a few times.
I've been through that. Yes.
You have to swim through the
Done that.
But the parade goes on.
Yes, it's a wonderful parade. It really is.
And is also there something coming up with, they had like an Irish fair.
Well, the Irish Fair is in June. That and it has been moved. It's going to be on the grounds at South Beach Psychiatric. Sounds strange, but there's 7 acres of land that's available that they're going to permit us to utilize so that we really can spread out and hopefully, you know, accommodate a lot more people on Staten Island. You know, again, it's the Irish Fair, but everyone's welcome.
And what do they do at an Irish fair?
Well, at the Irish Fair, tents, they have the vendors, they have games for children to keep the children busy, and then they have food. And it's just a day of enjoying the culture and each other's company.
Okay.
So it's a wonderful event, you know, to share in.
I've been to a few of those too.
Yes.
They're great. Pat, what else is coming up with the Staten Island Museum?
Well, there's always plenty of things happening at the museum. As a matter of fact, we invite people to contact us to get on our mailing list to receive our newsletters. There's always things going on. We have mini camps with our curator of science, Ray Matarazzo, that go on during the holiday season. They go on in the summertime. Parents are invited to call and register for that and get details about that. We have school programs. We have thousands and thousands of school kids that come every year to the museum. We have educators that go off-site, go into the schools, talk about dinosaurs, talk about art, talk about artists, history. We have a Staten Island Ferry program specifically geared for school students, so the teachers can call up and kids go out on the Staten Island Ferry and they learn about what's going on in the harbor. Again, why did the ferry start? Why does it operate? They learn about transportation systems. They learn about Lower Manhattan. They learn about Staten Island. We have natural history programs that go into the parks and they learn about nature and botany and geology and go to the beach, and all kinds of fun things are going on. We have an exhibition right now, Jenny Tango, a retrospective of her career. She's a very well-known artist on Staten Island, resident of Staten Island. It's curated by her husband, Robert Bunkin, who's an artist and a professor. That's going to be up for the next month or so. I invite people to come over and see that. So again, we have the Staten Island Ferry exhibition is a permanent exhibit. The Hall of Natural Science is a permanent exhibition, and we have the Lenape of Staten Island, talking about Staten Island's earliest residents. All kinds of fun artifacts are in this show. We have arrowheads and hammerheads and mortars and pestles that were actually found on Staten Island. They're actually on display for people. So, you know, the museum is open. It's open Tuesday through Saturday from 9 to 5. And on Sundays from 1 to 5, and we invite people to come out and see what we have, learn about nature, learn about history, learn about the art world of Staten Island. It's really cool stuff.
Okay. Time is starting to go by really fast. We have a phone caller, and we'll take the phone call. Okay, caller, you're live.
Yes, hi, Pat from the museum. What articles will be featured in the next issue of the Staten Island Proceedings, please?
Sure. Proceedings, thanks for bringing that up, caller. Proceedings is the scholarly publication of the Staten Island Institute of Arts and Sciences. It was started in 1883. It's a fabulous publication, and we have an article by Richard Simpson, who I previously mentioned. Rich is going to be writing about Carrere and Hastings, two prolific architects who, John Carrere actually lived on Staten Island, and Carrere is actually buried up in Moravian Cemetery. He designed, along with Hastings, the public library that's in St. George, the Supreme Court building that's in St. George, and the Borough Hall building, which is quite impressive, that's in St. George. Overall, they are affiliated with the New York Public Library building up on 42nd Street that was developed. The man Robert Bunkin, who I just mentioned, he'll be doing an article on Percy Leeson, who was an artist who came here from Australia, and he was very well known for the various artwork that he developed, a Staten Island resident, and he was involved with the art section of the Institute back in the 1940s or so. I'll be doing an article about farming on Staten Island, which, having grown up in Bull's Head with all those Greek farmers and Italian farmers, I experienced the truck farms of Staten Island without knowing that it was a world that was rapidly changing. So I wrote an article about it, and that's going to be featured in the next issue of Proceedings. So it's an eclectic mix of things focusing on history and nature and the art community of Staten Island.
Okay. All right, thank you, caller. Time is really going by fast now. One question, you brought up the Lenape Indians. Would you know if there would be a powwow this year?
I haven't heard of one. I know in years past there used to be one held at the Snug Harbor Cultural Center, but I haven't heard of anything coming up at the present time. But we do have a science department. Ed Johnson is the curator over there, and for anybody who's interested in the Lenape on Staten Island, I suggest you give Ed a call. He knows everything and anything there is to know about the Lenapes and their presence on Staten Island.
Okay, thank you. How much time we have, Chris? About 2 minutes? Okay. Any closing thoughts, Margaret, about the Irish on Staten Island?
Well, I just think if if you're Irish, that you should enjoy your culture, enjoy the traditions, and become a part of organizations that promote our culture. And I don't really want to give my phone out all the time, but I'm sure that there are ways to find out in the papers. Look in the we often advertise in the advance, and our meeting notices are in the advance. So if you want to become involved, look for those little pieces and join us, and you'll have a great time, and you'll enjoy your work. You'll enjoy our charitable work that we do. It really gives people a lot of satisfaction and a lot of motivation to become part of our organization because of what we do.
Okay. Thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Pat, closing thought? We have about a minute.
Well, I would encourage everybody and anyone on Staten Island to delve into their history, whether it's Irish history or their Italian history or their local community history, to give us a call at the Institute, at the Archives and Library. We love to have researchers come in. We have researchers come in on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays by appointment. You can learn anything and everything about Staten Island, resorts, the landfill, geology, botany, all kinds of natural history topics. Give us a call. Come in, study, study, study.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I want to thank everyone for joining tonight, and hopefully the luck of the Irish will be with all of us
Yes.
in the future. So thanks for joining. Good night.